We've now moved to the back of the 2007 Yukon, and we're going to service the rear disc brake. This particular style brake system uses a drum in hat, as it's called, for the emergency brake. It'll have a small drum shoe underneath this drum hat portion of the rotor, and we'll look at that once we get it apart. On this particular caliper to caliper mount fastener, when we turn the caliper fastener, it just spins. The entire caliper slide is spinning, so we're going to have to use another wrench to get on the wrench flats of the caliper slide to hold it still so that we can break loose the caliper bolt. Pretty common design on a lot of disc brake applications, where you would have to hold this caliper slide from turning while removing the caliper fastener itself to the caliper mount. Just like on the front, you can see the presence of Loctite on thread fasteners. Very important to replace that when going back together. This rotor is rusted to the hub as the front one was, and like the front one, it has jack screw holes threaded into the rotor hatch, and we're going to go ahead and use some bolts to thread into those holes that will push on the hub and hopefully remove this rotor, separating the rust ring around the rotor hat face. With the old rotor removed, you can see the emergency brake setup on this 2007 Yukon. It's what's called a drum in hat style emergency brake that uses an old school style drum brake for application of the emergency brake. This shoe here can be inspected for friction loss. In most cases, the shoe is in pretty good shape because it's not used to stop the vehicle. It's only used to keep the vehicle parked. Once you remove the two retaining clips that hold the shoe against the back axle plate, you can then work the shoe loose and remove it off of the hub. Once the old brake shoe is removed, if we come up to the adjuster, it's a good idea to back the adjuster all the way into the retracted position with this little thumb wheel that's up here on the top. A screwdriver usually works pretty good in rotating it, and that will ensure that the brake shoe is fully retracted to where when we reinstall the rotor, it won't cause us any problems in rotor installation. Once the new shoe is installed, we're going to reinstall the retention clips starting by putting some Loctite on the threads of the bolts. Then we'll tighten them down. With the new brake shoe installed, I refit the rotor, and the emergency brake adjustment is too loose. So we're going to adjust this little thumb wheel up here with a screwdriver and expand the emergency brake shoe to where we have good drag against the drum in the rotor hat. And this is a trial and error type adjustment because there's no access on the back of the backing plate with a slot. So we're just going to have to move it a little bit and fit the rotor and see if it fits any better. Again, we're going to take and install Loctite on the fastener that holds the caliper mount to the rear axle before installing the bolt. With the bolts hand tight for the caliper mount, we're now going to torque them to 80 foot-pounds.